Okay, excellent. The live stream is on. So, Mohammed and Supreet, who wants to go first? I mean, with your initial thoughts.
I think I'll go first.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Um, Actually, like it was a new concept for me. The idea, the way it was presented, the film was new. Like I personally never seen a film where clay dolls or wooden dolls, anything was no, well even used per se. They were mainly used as props or something in some horror films, but never used as no as representation of their characters. This was something new for me, and I liked it. Uh,
Mm-hmm,
sure, I I did feel a bit tired after first half an hour or 45
mm-hmm,
minutes, and
mm-hmm.
I did skip off half an hour of the film.
Okay.
But I liked the film even because of that. Mm.
Mm-hmm,
So it's a bit of a new thing, new concept, new idea. I
mm-hmm,
know it's for genocide, but it's a new idea, something refreshing. That take on which they use clay idols and photos, like the
mm-hmm,
one in which they use the Buddhist dance, the Khmer dance. No idea what it's called.
mm-hmm,
Yeah. Uh, as no, something is it's a family bonding exercise
mm-hmm.
when the nighter was a kid. That was new. That was something which I like to see more in films.
Sure,
That's it.
sure.
Um,
And you mentioned the aspect of the clay and the live video, etc. How did the interplay make you feel? Did you have a particular reaction to it? Do you feel evokes the kind of emotions it was trying to evoke?
I mean, I personally felt a bit tense kind of thing. I was like,
Mhm,
I was trying to sympathize with those people, and I did. But no, like the actions of the Khmer Rogue, they made
mhm,
me feel tense. Like of tense for safety, for like they're going to die today, they're going to die tomorrow, kind of
mhm,
thing.
mhm,
Uh, that was that. That's what you're asking for. Yeah, that I felt. And then I felt a bit when the narrator talks about his brother or something. He's a
mhm.
musician in no whatever is it. Yeah, and he may be killed or something.
True.
Yeah, that was some a thought. That was nice. Right? The
Mhm,
visuals made me think of a person flying, going like flying like if like a person is high or something. The
mhm,
visual of that. But other than that, this one was a new concept, new film for me. I
mhm.
liked it.
That's that's good. That's good. So, Mohammed, what are your thoughts on the film?
yeah, I'll be adding to what Suprit has said. It was very innovative way of presenting a movie.
Mhm,
Why? Because when I thought of the theme that it is genocide, the first thing was like, what are the ways of conveying that theme? So
mhm,
maximum like film we have seen Schindler's List. I have seen lot of footages, everything. What maximum way of interpreting or showing to the audience may be
mhm,
different. And the first movie itself, it blew my all assumption. Okay, this is a very innovative way of conveying this theme also, and the way it was presented, it was really very innovative. There is a footage background, there are clay,
mhm,
and very
mhm,
importantly, the clays are not moving. That
mhm.
was intriguing because few days back I was researching on Shaun the Sheep. I think you
Mhm.
have heard Shaun the Sheep, that cartoon.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so I was researching on that, and I never thought that unmoving clays and background voice and so nicely articulated that feeling of those clay uh,
Mhm,
bodies. Like it was connecting, as Supri said. Yeah, it was little bit saddening or depressing whenever we saw. Little bit it was uncomfortable,
mhm.
and that's a good thing. That's a good thing that movies should have that effect on you.
True.
uh, and yeah, so first I'll give 5 out of 4 for this movie because I really love way it is conveying,
Mhm.
and not the traditional way of just telling the story, but very innovative way of conveying the same thing. That's creativity, telling the same thing in a different way.
Mhm.
That's really creative. Yeah, that's my
That's
first impression.
interesting. That's interesting.
And
Uh,
one more thing.
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Mm.
Yeah, I think I remember seeing a V2 video which can convey the same thing. It has the same kind of unique presentation like this
Mhm.
film had.
Mhm.
Uh, I'm trying to find the video right now. What is like, it's around a 1 minute video long. It's about the Weimar Republic and the Germans now, 1933. Wait, I said in the chat box. You can continue
Yeah,
discussion.
sure, sure. It's better if you share it on the main group because that way others might happen to incident on it.
Sure, let me just search for that book.
Yeah.
Nikhil, your first views means why did
Yeah.
you choose?
So my, I mean, when Vishal and I, okay, if you want the whole story, I'll go through the whole story. If you want just the reason for picking this particular film, I can,
Yeah,
talk about that.
yeah, I'm interested in that. Why did you choose? Means how did you come to a conclusion that this movie should be chosen?
Okay. So we actually started out with looking for feature films, and only later did we think it would be more appropriate to look at uh, films that encompassed many stories in the given time frame. And what better to uh, you know communicate that than documentary films? And like I've highlighted in the uh, tiny brief that I've written with the curation, um, the point of this particular documentary was looking at the revolution, which is something uh, a communist revolution, which is something that we are pretty much on the edge in terms of, according to a lot of scholars. So looking at that and comparing their treatment, humanist in air quotes, humanist treatment of the bourgeois, that was the whole idea of it. And the Cambodian genocide was not an isolated incident like the Rwandan genocide, which is, I suppose, the fourth documentary of the month, or the what word? Sure, or the native. Okay, the Native American genocide is a perpetual, ongoing process. It has never stopped ever since the expedition landed on the American continents. But on particularly with this, it had a very strong connection with the war, the Vietnam War, and it had its influences directly coming from Mao Zedong and Ho Chi Minh from the neighboring countries, and the eventual destruction and the eventual loss of life was what interested Vishal and I. And this was a very unique government setup compared to the rest of the films in the lineup.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks.
Yeah, but if you're talking, so that justifies the choice for it being about Cambodia. But why Rithy Panh? Rithy Panh actually went through the he was actually in the camps. He was actually in the labor camps. He lost his parents and his brother, as the documentary explores. I mean, it is more or less a reflexive documentary. So I think we can get to the classification of different types of documentaries, which is also one of the considerations for the curation for this month. So this is more or less a reflexive documentary where the director or the filmmaker is, in some sense, going through uh, a memory, or is in some sense interacting with the audience directly without not really being an observative, passive observate, passive observative uh, cameraman. So Rithy Pan's direct influences and his first-hand experiences in Cambodia during the Khmer Rouge is what pushed us to select the missing picture.
Oh, yeah. Um, that interesting. But he is a. Why was it made in French?
He actually moved to France. Once he lost his parents, he had to move to France.
Oh,
So he essentially grew up in France after he left the labor camp he spoke about in the documentary. But I suppose Supreet was on the verge of describing something, describing his opinion on some aspect of film. I think.
nah, now that I think of it, I
Mhm,
think I had a bit of trouble to differentiate between the writers.
mhm,
They were more than two, right? Not
mhm.
mistaken. I had a bit of trouble in that differentiating between the
Your
writers.
voice is a bit faint. Can you speak a
Yeah,
bit louder?
am I audible
Slightly.
now?
Yeah, much better.
Yeah, I had a bit of trouble differentiating between the writers. During the course of the film, the writers went a bit like uh, I couldn't differentiate well easily. Like
Mhm,
I knew like the first sometimes I got I got confused quite a lot between the
mhm,
writers. Who
mhm,
which writer we're talking to right now?
mhm.
That happened
Uh,
to me in the film.
okay. Mm. I mean, it's the names initially are pretty confusing. That's an understandable position.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
As follow-ups, I think there are two more documentaries that I could watch because I didn't find a lot of Rithy Pann's material on the internet, or I'm not really good at looking. I'm not sure which one is the answer, but there is S21, the Killing Machine, Khmer Rouge.
Let, uh, like the 25 films right now on Google.
No,
25.
there are a lot of films from his end, but I couldn't download any of them.
Ah, okay.
I actually looked for the torrent. I couldn't find any CDs. I searched for it on the streaming platforms. I couldn't find it there either. So coming back, I wanted to I wanted the three of us to take a look at various kinds of documentaries and, in a sense, build an appreciation to why this documentary is as powerful as we think it is. So, on a very broad scale, there are about five or six kinds of documentaries. You have the observational kind, which is essentially what Showa is about. You have, or if you have watched American Factor, I think we can probably have a crude activity on naming a couple of documentaries based on the definitions, just so we have a brief understanding of what we're talking about. So there is the observational documentary where the director and the rest of the team are essentially mute spectators, and they don't really interact with the environment, or they don't interact with us as well. So if you can think of any names for the documentary, I
I
mean,
think
for
we had one documentary like that in the animal theme. I'm forgetting the
precisely.
name of that movie. It
Uh,
it was a French. I don't know. It was in some other language, not English.
mhm.
So it was basically about the jungle. Like in the jungle, what happens? How
Oh,
paradise.
Haiwan and Hi.
Yeah, yeah. So
Uh,
it was the Paradise movie, the one with the word paradise in it. I'm not remembering the entire name of that.
okay, sure. I mean, if you can Google it and share the link in the main group, that would be excellent.
Hello.
It
Yeah,
was part of the curation itself. So yeah, you can actually. It must be on the list itself.
Yeah,
it
and
was part of our curation. Oh my God, I don't remember our own
Yes,
curation.
you were absent in that week, that entire month. You were absent.
Okay, is this the literature or the wildlife theme?
Yeah, wildlife one.
Oh, okay, okay. That was done mostly by Vivek. Okay, fine, fine, fine. Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, and if anyone is in the Last Emperor,
The
uh,
last.
the Last Emperor, it's a Chinese film. It's a Chinese
Uh-huh.
American film.
Uh-huh.
1973. It won an Oscar
Uh-huh.
actually.
Okay. Is
Uh,
this a Martin Scorsese film?
no, let me check. Actually, no. Let me just check.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. That is Kundun. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Ah,
Yeah. Okay, I'm just searching for it. 1987. Not mistaken.
mhm, mhm, mhm.
Around 3 hours long.
Okay.
Bernardo Bertolucci. It's a
Okay.
director.
Ah, Bernardo Bertolucci. Okay.
Yeah, that was no that was like a perspective of an aged person writing a diary note.
Mm-hmm.
So it was an observational film
Mm-hmm.
in that way. It's like
Interesting.
aged emperor writing his experiences, memories.
Interesting. In terms of when you look at that, there is a very strong influence from documentaries onto feature filmmakers, and a lot of them start out as documentary filmmakers. Hirokazu Koreeda, for example, he started out as a documentary filmmaker, and you can see that reflection on Marlboros, and you can see that reflection all the way down to Shoplifters or La Verite, the French film that he directed. And it's not just with Koreeda. You have that with Abbas Kiarostami as well. If you look at his initial works, much before the Coca trilogy, Coca trilogy was essentially his big break. So if you look at his films and his short films before that, it had that documentary verite kind of feel, wherein he just follows the character without really interacting with him. And that is a very strong influence from documentaries onto feature films. And we see that most often in these art house filmmakers, because the commercial filmmakers would want it to be interactive just so they want the audience don't really bore themselves out. And additionally, there are a couple of commercial elements they are in some sense forced to install throughout the film. Anyways, observational. Mohammed, can you think of any examples?
No, I have very little, information on
No
this.
problem. Even the BBC documentaries are in some sense observational
Yeah,
as well.
actually, I am very fond of documentaries rather than film because they are more authentic and research based. But yeah, reflective
Feature
documentary
films
where
are
they're
research
not
based.
talking to us.
It's not like feature films are outside of any inherent research, because it requires a significant amount of research for the production design. It requires a solid level of understanding for the character depth. And additionally, if it's something like Interstellar or Inception, it requires, I mean, particularly with Interstellar, from what I've understood, there are about two or three papers from the um, uh, what's the company? There are essentially two or three papers from the visual effects team,
Mm-hmm.
and that was with the Nobel laureate Kip Thorne. So
But I
it
think they add a fiction with factual, means they
yeah,
blend.
that I mean that is essentially the core foundation of a feature film. Uh,
Oh, really? I didn't know this. Mm.
it cannot be sidestepped.
Oh.
Anyways, yeah, documentaries and BBC documentaries are in some sense a very direct example for observational documentaries. And there are participative, and there are um, um, reflexive documentaries as well. And this documentary is essentially a reflexive documentary. I'm just trying to lay the foundation for ourselves, just so we can navigate ourselves through the nature of this documentary much better. And I try to understand why a reflexive documentary in this regard was the most efficient and the most powerful in terms of communicating what the director wanted to communicate. So, reflective documentaries. Outside of the one we have right now, Garlic is as good as 10 Mothers, which was part of the curation for December. That was a participative documentary. And reflexive documentaries, you have um, let me get back to it. So reflexive
Dreaming,
documentaries are mostly
dreaming,
that.
dreaming नाक वो क्या था? Dreaming Murak, I think. I forgot the name. Was that also reflexive in nature?
Sorry, can you repeat name?
The last one for the literature one, Dreaming
Dreaming
Murakami.
Murakami. Dreaming Murakami was more or less observational, since it did not really have any direct interactions from the director.
Yeah, right. It was also like a mix of some fictional elements, like the frog part and all those things, right?
True, 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 true. It,
Uh,
I
one
mean,
one
the
clarification I want.
yeah,
Are
go ahead.
documentary needed to be very factual, or can they be fiction also?
Um, you don't really have to. They don't really have to follow up on that. Give, for example, if it's a poetic documentary, there was a poetic documentary on the Titanic. There is also a poetic documentary on religion by Mohsen Makmalbaf, the gardener, I suppose. So it was more of, it was trying to explore the poetic end, and it was trying to debate from two sides of the on two different issues on one particular religion. So the gardener by Mohsen Makmalbaf,
Hmm.
and it doesn't really have to convict itself to that. If the nature of the documentary doesn't demand it to be. Or, for example, if it needs to talk about the Vietnam War, for example, Ken Burns' 10 series documentary, uh, it needs to have the factual, it needs to be factual. If
Oh,
not, yeah, it doesn't really stick to what it's trying to communicate. It essentially becomes propaganda by that in that degree.
hello, hello. Yeah, I just quick question here.
Yeah.
Uh, okay, what kind of a documentary which where people recreate situation per se, like having real characters and all that. Uh, I don't know. For example, say the April 9th, by Pillow
Hmm.
Spec, and or even Amadeus, the one with Mozart and Salieri. What was his name? The film.
Wherein they recreate.
A historical, no, historical rivalries, for example, historical war situation. For example, like
Mhm.
Amadeus about Mozart and Salieri's rivalry, historical, widely celebrated rivalry. Uh,
It still be within the realms of observational, because so you can broadly divide it between interactive and non-interactive from the director.
and if say something like the April 9th, I sent it to in the group a few weeks ago. It's a
Mhm.
film a pillow aspect, and it's about the German invasion of Denmark for
Okay.
yeah in
Mhm.
1940. The
Yeah,
war,
that would be observational as well.
like he was part of a cycling battalion, I mean, if I can call that. Mm. Cycling
Okay.
paratroopers.
Okay.
Mhm.
Unless the you can broadly divide it between interactive and non-interactive, and if it's non-interactive in any fashion, if the director is not directly influencing key events in the documentary, then you can quite easily classify it as an observational documentary. Observational or poetic, wherein the director doesn't have a physical influence on you know,
And
the
one more
documentary.
thing, and if say a documentary or show or a film or something is
Hmm.
based on event, say, have you watched MASH? It's an
Hmm.
American TV series,
Yeah, I have.
about 50 years old. That is based on Korean one, but
Mm-hmm.
that in days last for 10 to 12 years. The
Hmm.
series lasts for.
Hmm.
So that is technically that doesn't exist in real life. It's just inspired by Korean War, and it has some situations which is relevant to Korean War,
Hmm.
and also like something. that can be considered as part something from documentaries. Is it a feature
It could be
show or something?
docufiction. It could be docufiction. You don't. I mean, if some of the elements of the documentary are fictional, and if it's implied by the director himself, then you can classify it as a docufiction.
Okay.
But if there is direct and voluntary, you know, doctoring of the history or the sequence of events, then it is essentially propaganda.
Hmm.
And I think we actually wanted to explore propaganda month as well before, but I think we can probably look at it in the near future since it has some really good works, uh, you know, in its name, in its umbrella.
Yeah, that is interesting to explore propaganda thing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um,
Definitely, next Valentine's Day, next Valentine's year.
yeah, I mean that was the whole idea of having a genocide theme in the on Valentine's month.
The
Some
one thing I
poetic just.
appreciate you choose this, reflective documentary is that
Uh-huh.
because it's a historical event,
Hmm.
and to really capture, grasp that feeling and incident, I think movie can't justify that theme because
Mm,
okay, what is the
uh,
limitation of Cinder's List? And though it is a movie, people don't it's a lovable movie. I really loved it, but when
mhm,
it is done in a documentary form,
mhm.
I think people will appreciate more, rely on it more. Is that justifiable? What I am saying?
Uh,
Mm,
yeah. Can
I'm,
I interrupt?
I mean, yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Like, while I like agree to this, but I think I may differ with your observation. Like, a movie is actually the first experience we have. See, I knew a bit about Pol Pot or something. I read about it in the encyclopedia a long time ago. I never knew much about it. This
Mhm,
film made me actually realize what atrocities were and everything.
mhm,
So this was like my first influence, my first experience with the Pol Pot regime and everything. I
mhm,
can go and search for the entire Pol Pot history right now, and I may or may not plan to. But I have an idea. I know what to base my observations in the future on.
mhm,
So in that way, a film is much more helpful. A documentary, while helpful, is much more serious for it. You have to be fully interested in the entire show, fully interested in the entire sequence. Say
mhm,
I'm watching with the Holocaust. I
mhm,
know much of the Holocaust, so I can sit through a documentary like the third week shallow that film,
mhm.
and I can watch it. Mhm.
Sure.
Yeah, and but say if I didn't know about the Holocaust, or if I was Holocaust, like I just didn't want to accept the Holocaust happen or something. In
Mhm,
those cases, I wouldn't. I had to relearn, re-educate myself. A documentary was putting straight in my face. And this happened, like these people died, and this happened, that happened. How
mhm.
people were raped, murdered. Like I know it's like right in front of me. A film breaks it down to me slowly, gently. It's like that river kind of thing. The documentary more of a dam blockading their entire river.
True. I mean, in some sense, adding uh, an adjacent point to Supreet's, um, you don't you cannot have a universal opinion on that because the way the story is approached with a feature film and the way the story is approached with a documentary might be quite different, and trying to hold them under the same lens would be a bit difficult. And I'll give you an example. When we started out with the curation, we actually wanted to have feature films, only feature films. So we were running ourselves through, potential films for the Rwandan genocide, and some of them were pretty poor, and some of them really captured a good essence of it. And one of that was um, God Sleeps in Rwanda. No, wait, no, The Day God Walked Away. I'm sorry. The Day God Walked Away. It was an excellent film, and it did not really have any of the killings. And much of the film captures you with the sound, and as the sound becomes a very important aspect of it, and there is a heightened sense while as you just 10 or 15 minutes through the film, there is a heightened sense wherein you begin to notice the smallest uh, you know changes in sound, the smallest movement in the bushes, and that becomes very important, and in some sense reflects the anxiety the protagonist goes through. So you are put through uh, an actual scenario, a simulation, particularly with a feature film, wherein with a documentary, and it also depends on how you what kind of documentary it is. Since we were talking about a reflexive or a observational documentary, it entirely depends on the kind of documentary we're talking about and the narrative power of it. For example, if you watch a documentary on Al Jazeera on the Vietnam War, you might not be as moved as the docu-series from Ken Burns, because the cinematographic techniques, the editing, there's actually a particular uh, effect Ken Burns mastered. It's called the Ken Burns effect, wherein as the narrator uh, walks us through the consequences, I mean, the events, the photo, the picture is in some sense enlarged in diagonally. So the picture starts to sink in with the narration, and there are some very influential pictures from the Vietnam War, particularly the aftermath of the napalm blasts, wherein small children are seen running away from the smoke. I think this is a pretty influential uh, this is a pretty influential picture, and there's also the Burning Monk, which was the precursors of you know the divide that would eventually come in South Vietnam. So, like I was saying, it entirely depends on the story. There's actually not. I'm not sure which theory this is called. Um, um, Not the author theory. Not. I'll just Google the name whilst I describe it. So it actually talks about how not the director, but the story writer is the essential master of a particular film, and the director isn't more or less the leader who um, uh, structures the entire thing based on what the story writers tell him to do. Tell you what the name of the theory is. But anyways, yeah, you can continue the conversation
Yeah,
once this is
yeah, I agree with that. What you have said to convey a protagonist's agitation or the suffering, like
hmm
moving bushes, the clouds, black clouds.
hmm
Movie can convey, and we feel more connected, and that emotion, it sinks in,
hmm
and that is what happens with the feature films and all those movies uh, which have been made on genocide. Yeah,
hmm
yeah, I agree with that. In that part means the on based on authenticity documentary can be relied because I can go and research about it in deep, because I did the same after watching this the missing picture. I went back to history,
hmm
Cambodia, what happened, why did they for 4 years, how many people killed, 1.5, 1.7, and
hmm
why USA was also, they say USA was involved, all those details.
USA is pretty much involved in.
But I am not sure because I have to again go and search before I come to a conclusion. uh,
Mhm,
so yeah, it's beautiful. If you want to academic, you want to go deeper to touch the core of the incident, then
mhm.
documentary are much more. But movies,
It gives you a good
emotion.
overview. It gives you a good starting point from
Yeah,
where
two.
you need to start out with.
Two.
Oh, by the way, the theory I was talking about is called the Schreiber theory. Schreiber
Please
theory.
share it in the
I'll share
group.
the link on. Yeah, I'll share it on the group. Yeah. So, what were we talking? Hmm.
Types of documentaries.
Types of documentaries, yes. I mean, since we have established this is a reflexive documentary, and since we have established the history of the director as well, we get a good sense on why a personal story told whilst the director as a child was subjected through that environment and told from his personal lens is much more powerful than, I mean, at least in this case, much more powerful than uh, uh, a a panorama view of the entire incident. And also, I wanted to discuss with you on
Hey,
the
one minute.
juxtaposition.
One minute. One
Sorry?
minute. 1 minute. Before starting
Yeah.
the conversation,
Yeah.
just to mention a child's point of view in the film. This
Hmm.
one actually has reminded me of the film Shoeshine Boy, last month first relation.
Yeah. Mm.
The same thing happened there. Like, we talked about post war Italy, and how the two children were struggling to survive and everything,
Hmm.
the juvenile prisons and everything, and then
Hmm.
Italy. The
Hmm.
same thing happens. The child's point of view is much more powerful, much more noticeable in the entire film than if I say adults had been part of the prison system or something in Italy.
Hmm.
And the same thing which happened the what was that missing picture? The case when
But there are two key
the
nuances
case where
behind.
the mother and sisters of the one dies and this person has
Hmm.
to bury them all. That
Hmm.
was more that felt more important if say adult man or something, and then I guess it wouldn't have felt like it would have conveyed much more stronger emotions. You would have felt a bit anger or pity, max. Here you feel
Hmm.
sorrow. You feel
But there are two key nuances here. One, when we were actually watching Shushan, it was mostly the projection of the entire society on those kids, and it becomes a social commentary on its own. And although it is from the eyes of a kid, we see the projection as well because we are acquainted with what the society is like, at least to a certain degree. And two, this was memory, essentially. The director was actively recollecting his life in the Khmer Rouge regime. And, that, uh, although he was a child, and although the recollections were that of a child, and what you're saying is essentially practically correct. There's no nuance. I'm not disagreeing with you. Uh, it recollection of a memory and projection have two different approaches and two different uh, implications on the audience.
okay.
And
That's
adding to Supreet's point, I
Mhm.
felt the same thing. Like there is a scene, the
Mhm.
sharing of the rice grain,
Mhm.
right? In that,
Mhm.
they say that okay, we are sharing the rice grain, but again he adds that no, we are sharing hunger.
Mhm.
Like a child will only see that okay, I am sharing, okay, we are sharing rice among ourselves, but
Mhm.
when we mature, when we see the our childhood, then we see that no, we were not sharing the grains, but we were actually sharing the hunger.
Mhm.
So that was a very new point of view, especially in a reflexive documentary matters a lot. Means
Sure.
as a kid, how you are viewing that situation, and now what means, how do you put a understanding what happened, why it happened. That's in this documentary, it was done very beautifully. The point of view and uh, the reason he's giving, that was really
True.
capturing.
True. And that is where I agree with Supreet as well. And I just wanted to point out the difference between shoe shine and the missing picture. Nothing else. Uh, But before we proceed, Kaival, do you have any comments?
Comments as in
What we're
exactly
talking
what?
about? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just listening right now because
Okay.
I feel that listening would help me a lot more.
Okay. So I wanted to talk about the juxtaposition of the clay setup and still pictures against governmental footage and news reports. Why do you think it was juxtaposed in such a way? What was he trying to communicate with that?
Yeah, I had the same question, but my
Mhm,
understanding, like, you know, we people as viewed as just a clay, a thing.
mhm,
But by showing the footage, it shows that no, it really happened. Usually with the clay, why do you use clay? Because for play purpose, we assume that this is a human, okay, this is a mother, father.
mhm,
But when we see that no, it has actually happened, those clays were really humans at some point in 95 to 99. They were people. Images are also are shown. Actually,
mhm,
there is a footage in the movie that shows these people are better as a image, as a stranger, than being a human, because
mhm,
we'll, by looking at them, we'll suffer a lot. And again, I think that he mentions that I don't want to capture the killing process. uh, he shows that person is cutting one's throat. That was also like saying that it's better not to watch that atrocity which have already happened.
mhm.
So, but I am not sure why it was done. I would love to learn your point of view. Means what do you uh, why it happened. Yeah.
I think it was done to drive the point home with the title itself also.
Mhm,
The missing picture, right?
mhm,
There's a lot of thing that which is not exactly documented, but I
mhm,
have lived through and I know this thing. These are the few things of the pictures that went out, but a lot of it is missing, still missing.
mhm,
So maybe that was like it was a wordplay, or maybe that was done. And again, he probably felt that, obviously with clay you do not have to go into the gory thing. Like you obviously you cannot recreate everything, and
mhm,
even that becomes a lot more easier with clay.
mhm.
So that might have been the initial thing, but then the title, they played with the title or something like that. That is my opinion. Again, a simple guess.
Mhm. That's interesting. And Supreet, what are your thoughts?
I don't have any specific thoughts on. I didn't watch entire film. Like I skipped a few parts of it. I think I skipped this part also.
Oh, okay.
So
So I'll share with you my thoughts on why that might, the juxtaposition was in the way it was. And I mean, we can probably critique based on what I say. So there are essentially two footages taken fundamentally. One, you have the stop motion and stills of these clay models, and on the other side, you have the the news reports, the propaganda videos from the government, etc. The propaganda videos were, in some sense, I mean, not just propaganda videos, but the live videos were, in some sense, made to was used to reflect on what the government was actually trying to portray, what was actually um, envisioned by the communist regime. But on the other hand, you have the clay models acting out the faint memories of this director, who is essentially moving around the clay models. I think there is one aspect where he picks up a clay model and moves it replace it with a different model. So it's essentially an interplay between memory and what was envisioned, and between what he felt he had lost and what the government felt it had gained or it would gain.
but
That is what,
but there
yeah.
were also a few clips of him when he is remembering what his
Hmm.
life was earlier, and they even used the clay in between that footage, right?
Exactly,
So there was
exactly.
also this thing also there. So again, it's not completely like the video is not only used for the government part, right?
No, no,
Even
no, it's
he
not.
is,
Mm.
but I think it's also used.
True, true. He is interacting with the video as well, but I'm supposing you're talking about the climax where the clays are essentially moving around with the video.
No, no, no. I'm talking about the he when he's. I mean, it's not exactly the climax. It's somewhere in the middle when he's remembering, na, that earlier this used to happen, and then there is a trap. The scene in the bus where ticket is being distributed, and they are
Mm-hmm.
showing everything that before the revolution, this was
Mm.
the thing, you know. So in those videos, they actually used proper videos over there also.
True,
So that is
true,
why
true,
I think that in a way that obviously most
true,
of the videos used were again the propaganda which
true,
the rebel
true.
group had used.
Mm.
There were also usage of video for that particular part of the.
True. Interesting point. So, the director had so he was classified as a capitalist, he was classified as an intellectualist and a bourgeoisie by the regime, and he and his family were sentenced to X years of concentration, work at the not concentration camp, but the labor camps. And essentially, everything was collectivized then, and collectivization is the core foundation of communist government, wherein the owners are everybody and not just the landowners who uh, were the owners before. And likewise, wealth is collectivized as well. And not, but collectivization of wealth depends on the kind of interpretation they take. Some are a lot more stricter than others. For example, Maoism is a lot more stricter than Leninism to a certain degree. Uh, Likewise, you had a more radical government here, and the director
There
was.
was this joke, yeah, there was a joke that they had this photo on the currency note, but no one is going to use that.
Hmm. And they isolated themselves, and that is also one of the that's also one of the core transitioning points for a communist regime from a capitalist or a feudal system to a utopic communist state.
I also
And
noticed that the deurbanization that they did, it
mhm,
actually was not really good for the normal public. So again, deurbanization failed basically. They are saying, and interesting thing is that I'm not sure. I've just heard it from a lot of people, but
mhm,
even a lot of Indian leaders during the initial days of our independence were like, we should deurbanize. Deurbanization is better. Every village should have this. Every village should have do this, and like they
that is
wanted
true.
to
That
organize
is
the
what
whole. Now
that is
I'm
what
not sure
Gandhi.
because this is again political stuff. I don't want to get into much, but I'm
I
I'm
mean,
glad
it's
that
fine
did happen.
since genocides cannot really be removed from the political arena altogether. For example, when we talk about the Rwandan genocide, we really have to talk about the proletariat uprising or the peasantry uprising, and that was how it was viewed. That was how the Hutus saw themselves, and the Tutsis were essentially seen as the bourgeois class, essentially oppressing the Hutus for centuries. And it's essentially unavoidable to a certain degree, and it's mostly how we frame our sentences, and it's mostly how we navigate ourselves through the discussions is what matters, I suppose. Yeah, he also the clay usually reflected his memory, and like Kaivalya pointed out, the hybrid of these videos and the clay models essentially reflected uh, 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 an integration of what the government intended and how they lived. And this was before the revolution. And after the revolution, it was mostly his memory against that of the government's. This is where, the hybrid, the uh, uh, pure clay models, I mean, the stills of the clay models and the government footage, in some sense, interplay with each other. And it's mostly his memory against what the government envisioned. In a sense, trying to reflect a sense of failure from the government's end on the uh, on the prisoners in the labor camp. For example,
Yeah,
he talked about. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I can. I think I agree with that because in the footage there are no any atrocities, any dead bodies shown in videos, anything. But
Hmm.
whereas in the clay, as a memory,
Hmm.
he shows like there is person cutting. There are dead bodies in hospitals. People are
Hmm.
dying. They are taking away the mother.
Hmm.
Uh, so yeah, I didn't observe this one in the footage. It is only how means they envision
Hmm.
what good will happen, but actually what happened the clay shows us.
Hmm. True. It's a juxtaposition to reflect a sense of failure, like I said, from the government's end to really live up to its ideals. So that he mentions in probably the uh, 20th or the 30th minute mark, where the government talks about equality and it talks about egalitarianism, but we are not treated equally. We are when we are in these camps, the person in charge, he has his own meal, but we have 250 grams of rice and we have to deal with that. And like one of you pointed out, we share hunger, we don't share the rice. So yeah, you can go ahead and you know share your opinions on that.
Yeah, what you said, yeah, I agree with that all.
Mhm.
If I have to move forward in the movie, what I
Mhm.
thought, like what history, I may be deviating from the movie, but
Mhm.
history to build that authenticity, how true the story is, and the art of the movie is unquestionable. The way he has
Mhm.
interpreted the conveyed, it's really
Mhm.
touching, not touching, but somewhere it has convinced, it has succeeded in convincing me, yeah, what has happened and what was envisioned. That was
Mhm.
beautifully showed. But apart from that, the movie, yeah, it's one of the best movie I've seen, I can say.
Mhm. I'm actually
When it comes
glad
to
that
art
you.
part, when it comes to the art part, I also like the way that they did the whole thing. Right? He said his
Mhm.
neighbor was the director, and then they showed him shooting. But what he
Mhm.
was shooting was then showed actual footage of a dancer, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And then again the projector part, right? The projector is clay, but
Mhm.
from the clay it is coming as actual footage. So I even like that innovation. I mean, it was very good. It was something unique, and I really liked it. That like that part.
Mhm. Interesting. Uh, could you repeat your last point? I mean, I phased out a bit.
Yeah, yeah. I was just saying that they integrated the clay part for
Mhm.
and the projection part, right? The
Mhm.
projector was made up of clay. They are
Mhm.
made to set propaganda movie. For the propaganda movie, they are collecting everyone and they
Exactly.
are have to
Mhm.
sit. It was all in the clay, and then the projector starts projecting, and the
Mhm.
projection that is coming out is actual projection,
True.
uh, the real projection. That and the one where the dancer bit is being sorry, being shot by the producer who was his neighbor. Sorry,
Mhm.
director's neighbor.
Mhm.
Yeah. So both
But
this
mhm.
thing was very interesting for me. Like merging this thing. It was like kind of like I remember something similar was done by Disney also for the Cinderella. Sleeping Beauty. Yeah,
Mhm.
Sleeping Beauty. Snow White, the Sleeping Beauty. They had the animation part and they had the real actress playing the Snow White. Something similar was done by Disney also, but I have not seen the original movie, the one I'm talking about right now. But yeah,
Oh,
it
you're
is very
speaking of
interesting.
the recent one? The recent Sleeping Beauty film?
No, no, no. I'm talking about the first one. I think it was one of the first movies that Disney had produced. Walt Disney.
Okay.
I mean, they had live action woman actress playing the this Snow White, and rest was animation, something like that. I mean, I have heard about it. I have never seen that movie, quite frankly speaking.
If
But
you
again,
want a more accurate verification, I think you can post it on the group. Vivek is really well versed with histories, with animation and history pertaining to it.
yeah, I think he if he was here, it would have been great.
Hmm. True. But you can post it on the group anyway, just so you can get a verification. I'm not really the right person to talk about animation because I have really little to no experience with animation.
I had a one question.
Hmm.
What if this documentary was made completely animation without clays? Would it have conveyed the message?
In some sense, it is partially animated, although not directly.
Because Grave of Firefly, uh,
Hmm.
that movie succeeded, but this person did very innovative, like clay plus, and clays are not moving.
Hmm.
That was interesting. So it's beautiful the art he has used to convey this one, and we can't question him anyway.
I mean, you cannot question that particular film, but if you feel like a particular medium might be a much better fit for a story similar to the one we watched in Missing Picture,
Mhm.
then I mean, that's actually good. I mean, you have your own original thought with that. That's
Do
that's
you
actually good to hear.
if a story, if I have a story,
Hmm.
it can be conveyed in a animation form or a movie form and clay form. So it depends on the my story, which emotion it want to convey, or how your means which
It's
medium should I
mostly
choose?
the okay. I cannot really make a declarative statement with this because I'm not involved in filmmaking. But I'm supposing it mostly has to do with how the kind of experience the director has and how versatile they prefer to be and what they think reflects their story much better. For example, if it's someone like Martin Scorsese, who has his experience in myriad of storytelling techniques, I mean myriad of films. He's good with drama. He's good with comedy. He's good with uh, um, no, drama. He's good with animation, or he's good with a hybrid of animation, which I mean, I'm not really sure of what you can call it, but uh, it he's good with period pieces. He
Mhm.
has his influence in a lot of these sectors. But on the other hand, you have directors like hmm, Adur Gopal Krishnan, who mostly take up films that have reflection on the particular social commentary, or Satyajit Ray or Mrinal Sen. Mrinal Sen has in pretty much every film a sense of proletariat uprising.
Mhm.
It might be direct, or it might be symbolic, or it might be indirect.
Mhm. And
So
I think it also depends on the audience, because have you seen means have you heard about this invincible series came on Amazon, right? Before coming to that series, it was magazine. I think people didn't appreciate that storytelling, like the person is trying to tell through a magazine, but it was much more appreciated as a animation.
I'm not really familiar with. Oh, are you talking about the Invincibles?
Yeah,
The
Invincibles.
Okay. I mean, I haven't really watched what's that film, so. I
Mhm.
cannot say anything about it. But I'm sure Kaivalya or Supreet can make comments on it.
Yeah, the as far as the invincible part comes in, I think after the success of Boys, they wanted something to do, and it got greenlit. And as far as this comic strip, you're talking about magazine. In magazine, there comes comic strip, right? So in comic strip, you can tell only a certain part of the story, right? Unless you are publishing comic, proper comic. And even in comic, it sometimes to complete a story, it takes like 3 4 issues. So people don't have patience. And second, consuming video audio is comparatively far more easier. I'm not going to judge anyone, but again, for me personally, I prefer video over reading. uh, Again, that is my choice. So that might be the reason why it got a lot more popular in the animation uh, medium than the comic strip medium. And as far as choosing the medium of storytelling, like you said, instead of clay animation, it could have been something other also. I think here the factor would have been that I'm just assuming that since the clay model was made in the movie itself, so I'm assuming that the director himself was doing this, making these models, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
or he had someone who was in touch with it. So here the person who is going to make the particular clay models is obviously in touch with the director. So the communication is definitely going to be very good. Even if he's not the director himself, if it's someone else, I am damn sure the director was comfortable with him portraying it exactly the way he wants it to be portrayed, right? So that also plays in, right? Sometimes the director is far more comfortable with a particular animator or particular animation house, so they
Mm-hmm.
would go over there. This is basically my 2 cents on this thing.
Mhm.
So this does play a very huge role, and sometimes again, it's also budget also plays a very huge role, right? Like for
Yeah.
True.
example, if you are going to do a CGI, live action CGI, then it's going to definitely take a lot more money than to make an anime. And if you have a sculptor and if you have all the time in the world, then doing clay animation is going to take far less money, far less budget than even the animation. So again, it depends upon the resources, depend upon the type of relation between the talent and the director, or the storyteller. So there are multiple factors involved.
Yeah, that's
And
interesting. Because if I have a story, then in which medium should I convey that? Like animation is there, like clay modeling. So I wanted to know which will be the perfect medium for my story to be more effective, so that the public will consume it, will be more comfortable in understanding it. And this documentary did it very well, like using clay. It was completely innovative way of conveying. So I wanted to discover more about the story part and the medium part.
Yeah, and then there is also one more thing. Now, if you do animation, then there is no reason to say that why you didn't show violence, because violence could also be animated. So here they said, oh, we do not want to show violence. Okay, in clay you cannot show violence as good in good manner, right? If you have seen any clay animated movies, usually the blood oozing out and all those things, it's very stupid, right? It takes away the seriousness. So they could have even used that as an excuse to not show violence. So even that is also another thing that just popped in my head.
and okay, I give it Kaivalya, but one more thing is, it shows animating in person in clay or wood artwork is much more human. It shows much more mature outlook to the entire show, entire film. It's like, I'm audible.
Yes, yes, you are
Yes,
audible.
yes.
Yeah, you're much more mature, much more serious about what you wanted to portray. Showing in animation is like showing the minions. Mm. Uh, you can make it extremely funny, or you can there be slight mishaps when you're doing um, a show, animated film, which will be comical in the long run. If you make a mistake when you are doing a clay artwork or something, you can cover it up. You can just say it as, it was part of it was how things were. It was like you can just show it as part of the film itself. But if you do it in animation, it'll be weird and it'll be funny actually. It will lose the seriousness of the entire film which you're trying to build up to the entire final point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, obviously story
Yeah.
though very
I'm
important,
not
but how you
so
feel like.
sure about that because I'm not so sure about that because I haven't, whilst watching any of the films for the curation for genocide, I didn't really feel emotionally overwhelmed. But when I watched Up, the animated film, or Inside Out, they really know how to capture the emotions. So it can be serious, it can be funny, and it entirely depends on how the director wants to, take the plot. One reason could be physical impossibilities. For example, if you cannot really have a house, floating with 1,000 balloons, uh, be made practically, and it would be pretty costly as well if that is the case. Or you cannot show the inside of someone's brain to be working in a certain way they do in Inside Out. Although the the emotion theory is actually well founded in psychology as well.
Yeah, that part also very much true because Inside Out really moved me,
Mhm.
and really it made it is capable of making you cry. It's really moving. Yeah, I think so.
By
It's
the
a
way, Mohammed, before you proceed, I
Hmm.
thought it might. I want to just try and introduce tiny reminders throughout the discussion, just so we are aware of the timing. So it's been one hour since the discussion started. If we, I just wanted to try that out. I got a few suggestions from a couple of friends and directors, and I want to just try that out if that's okay with the three of you.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Yeah. So sorry, continue, moment.
No, I said I'm okay. Okay, ready.
um, we did talk about to a very significant degree on the nature of the documentary we had at hand, but Rithy Panh, outside of The Missing Picture, is a celebrated documentarian, and he just doesn't dwell with one style, and it's not just one aspect of Cambodia that he covers. Much of his filmography covers various aspects. For example, one documentary covers the exploitation of women. The other covers the actual killings in the Khmer Rouge regime, and one more talking about the falsies within the own government itself. So you have all these documentaries um, uh, converging to the same filmmaker, but unique in their own respects in terms of how they tell the story. Which is why I wanted to take a look at um, the styles of documentaries themselves and the movements they had been through. For example, we are pretty familiar with the Al Jazeera kind of documentary, wherein it's essentially news reporting, and uh, that is essentially the kind of documentary we are more or less acquainted with. Poetic documentaries are a rarity for the most part. I mean, at least amongst us, since we haven't really picked a poetic documentary to curate so far. And uh, this is probably the second participative documentary that we had. But there was this period through the 60s or 70s, I suppose, which was essentially about cinema verite yeah, cinema verite, wherein it was mostly about truthful filmmaking. And it in translation it's actually called the direct cinema movement. And it mostly had its characteristics bound in the lighting, the quite reliable cameras, and the portable sound system, and I mean not sound system but the recording device. uh, if you have watched um, Garlic is as good as 10 mothers, you notice how the director goes around asking the children for their opinions on garlic. And that is essentially what um, cinema verite is about, at least fundamentally. So it essentially grew out as a reaction to, large studio-based documentaries that were being churned out in the 1940s and 50s. And it makes perfect sense that there was a large number of documentaries being put out back then, particularly because it was the time of war, and propaganda through documentary is one of the documentaries are a primary vehicle for propaganda through cinema. Examples for propaganda that you might have come across, particularly in terms of, say, documentaries. I mean, propaganda documentaries.
Yeah, because a lot of political means leaders, whatever documentaries have come,
Hmm.
people say that be careful, whatever information there about this person,
Hmm.
it is definitely manipulated and you may not get the real picture of that person.
Hmm.
And lot of documentaries, and I didn't know because I believed whenever I saw the name documentary, I thought okay, it's more authentic, I can quote this one in front of anybody, in front of my friends with more authenticity, and nobody will raise a voice in front
Hmm.
of me. But later on, as I started to explore more about documentaries, because at the
Hmm.
end of the day they are made by a human,
True.
and a human, even director who is making, definitely he has his taste, and definitely there will be
Biases.
his
Mm.
what to say, his point of view, his I don't know, but
Biases.
some limitation, because
Hmm.
one man is making it or guiding it. So
Hmm.
we should be, every documentary, if you say it's little bit, it has propaganda in some way.
That's
Not
true.
every, but yeah, majorly we have to be very careful.
It's mostly directorial bias, and it's mostly with the cinema verite movement, the direct cinema movement, that um, a lot of filmmakers began to acknowledge this. With the advent of these kinds of films by Robert Drew or Leacock, or uh, Alan King. With documentary films coming out of them, with much smaller crews, and portable and simpler recording devices, that we began to see the inherent bias that is with every documentary. And if you think about straightforward propaganda films like The Birth of a Nation by D.W. Griffith, or um, The Eternal Jew. I don't remember who was the director for this, but it was a Nazi propaganda film on Jews, and it is very cruel. It is very horrific. Uh, as in, you have the narrator directly dehumanizing uh, the Jews in this documentary. The Birth
Then,
of a Nation.
as an audience, how should I navigate these documentaries?
Um, I have no answer to that, but it's best if um, there is some supplemental reading done regarding the subject at hand. For example, there was a documentary that we had, about 2 years ago, before we anything about the film club had started. There were regular shows in BB Jagdish Science Center, and there was a documentary on cowspiracy, no, veganism. On it was essentially more or less propaganda in terms of the way it was portrayed, and much of the data was doctored.
Hmm.
So,
Is the
Is
one which
there
Joe Rogan actually had invited the guest. I forgot the name. Game Changer or something like that.
mhm.
I
So
think I think that is the document you're talking about
no,
veganism.
it has something to do with cowspiracy or uh, it's what the health.
mm,
Um, it was made from the same director who made Cowspiracy.
then because many film festival award many documentaries, right? Yeah,
Hmm.
on what basis criteria do they award them? Is this a how the
It
I'm curious.
probably has to do with the strength in the narration, the storytelling, and the simplicity or the extravagance. It most particularly is on how it moves. I mean, how it moves its audience. That is probably general for all kinds of films, even feature films and short films as well. If the director manages to
Hmm.
capture what he's going for, and if it
Okay,
is made
they
pretty
don't
well,
question the the truthness, how true events depicted in the
I
document. They
I
don't.
think I think that is done supplementally or adjacently by
Oh, okay.
film critics and historians as well. It's not just they don't just make a film and don't expect any criticism. Once they start getting criticism, it is bad press for the documentary. And when the documentary goes on to claim that it is being truthful, and when historians are denouncing it, that is essentially bad press. And it's actually, if it is awarded in any sense, at least logically, it would be it would reflect badly on the film festival as well. But if you're asking me for particular criterias these judges look for, I don't think I'd be the right person to answer that.
Yeah, I think I will search internet. Yeah, that's
Uh, I mean, I really don't have any experience with going to film festivals or being in a jury uh, or even having a one-on-one conversations with in a film festival. So I wouldn't be the right person to talk about that directly. But at least from my very crude understanding, it has mostly to do with what the director is trying to portray, or what the director is trying to give us, and how efficiently he does it.
yeah.
Anyway,
So.
even Garlic is as good as Ten Mother was also propaganda documentary, right?
Yes, but the particular reason it was chosen. I mean, I was the only one who was curating back for that month. So the particular reason I chose garlic was to reflect how multidimensional garlic's influence has been on humanity. I mean, it nothing. They talk about how garlic heals actual wound, not actual wounds, but a lot of medical ailments, which is not entirely true, and it doesn't have any sound medical grounds to make those statements. But uh, it was mostly as an anthropological study on how garlic has influenced
Yeah,
us.
yeah, I understood that. I understood that. But I was just saying that they
Yeah,
actually changed
absolutely, absolutely.
that. Okay, this claim is unverified. So in a way, it was a propaganda, in sort of
Yeah, it is.
propaganda.
It is direct propaganda. Yes, it is direct propaganda, and I'm not sure if that was what LeBlanc was going for, or I don't think accuracy was what he was going for. He probably
Yeah,
want
yeah,
to. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
But
I've seen this thing
most
a
of them
lot
are
of times.
straight up nonsense.
Yeah, true. I mean, even when you go with for news channel, even they do the same thing, na. They just take the bites and then they only show those bites which are good. He might have not done that thing, that he might not have selected the bites, but yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, showing the bites which basically propel a particular narrative that is done by most of the news channels, depending upon what they are leaning with.
That's true. That's true. And if we are done talking about this particular documentary and very crude aspects of the film moment as well, I think we can close the discussion on that and then move on to talking about news channels, because that is a very interesting topic given the arena we are in right now. Are there any closing thoughts on the documentary?
No, I got to learn a lot of things now. Yeah.
I think
Supreet and Kailash? Mm,
I was just going to mention that weirdly enough, this documentary while watching it, it sort of like gave me a vibe of the Naxal moment, right? I
mhm.
mean, I'm not saying that each and everyone is wrong or something like that, but most of the people are like misled in the name of this thing. Oh, we will give you justice, just like this rogue, whatever it was name of that
Naxal
organization.
movement is essentially a communist movement.
Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, it basically reminded me a lot of that thing. Like I've seen it from from both the sides, from the right and the left leaning people.
Mhm.
They all said the same thing, that what, it is the leaders that are misguiding and they are giving them. I mean, why would you want to stop construction of road to your village? It really doesn't make sense. So
Um,
it just gave me that particular vibe, watching this movie.
okay, so I mean, I just wanted to make this statement before we close because so Naxal movements are usually associated with villages and grow around villages, particularly because they answer, or in some sense, they revolt against the sufferings of the village, the taluk. And they they strongly denounce the zamindari system. They strongly denounce governmental influences encroaching, the land. And I'm supposing what you're talking about had some aspects of land encroachment by the government directly, and that is probably why the Naxals had to get involved. There is also uh, what is the name of the film? There's actually a film that captures uh, the sufferings these lone tribes go through, or lone uh, uh,
Obviously,
tiny
obviously,
villages go through.
no, I'm saying obviously suffering is there. That is why they are in the first place misguided. That this is doing this is doing that. But I
No,
think
in
that
terms of ideology, they're not misguided because that is how the core foundations of Marxism is laid on. He talks about how the proletariat has nothing to lose but their chains, and Maoism is essentially an extension of that, and it talks about peasantry, which is why you have actual Maoists in many of the seven sister states, and Naxalism, in some sense, also deals with Maoism, but in terms of communism, the core foundation is the uprooting of the bourgeoisie, and that and the methods they use and the fine nuances, take them on very different paths. For example, there's Trotskyism, there's Stalinism, there's Leninism, there's Maoism, there's I'm supposing there's also a different interpretation of communism for the one we watched right now. I mean, the Cambodian Khmer Rouge regime as well. And Ho Chi Minh had a very different interpretation of uh, uh, communism. And it was close to Maoism, but it had its own cultural nuances as well. It was different in Cuba, it was different in Venezuela, it was different in the USSR, it was different in Poland. So, but all of them foundationally stand on uprooting the bourgeoisie. And here, for the Naxals, the bourgeois is essentially the zamindars. And the ones who are, uh, in bed with them is the government.
Oh, hello.
Hello? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can't comment much on the topic, but
Hmm.
documentary is good,
Hmm.
and you can say that, uh, the people like Pol Pot or the Big Brother and all had their own separate different views. Like they were all intellectuals and they were all like learned intellectuals who were philosophers and they were scientists, poets who were who had their own opinions based on what they had experienced,
Hmm.
and they explained it in ways to which like, to convince masses of people to join the revolution,
True.
to join their movement. Mm.
Hmm.
And that's actually something that you can say, like, how one person's point of view can actually change the entire country's future.
Hmm.
Mm. And that is something which has to be known and appreciated. Um, no, no, I'm not appreciating the genocide and everything, but uh, I'm just saying that one person's a singular motive, singular idea of change. Mm.
Hmm.
Whatever one version of that can bring people together.
This is not particularly a single person's motive, but instead an ideology, like I was talking about. I'm not. I mean, I'll be very honest. I don't subscribe to the ideology very directly. So I'm saying this just so you don't think my personal thoughts are
Yeah.
influencing my comments. The comments I'm making right now. So when I spoke about the ideological uh, uh, determination Naxals have when I was talking to Kaivalya, I didn't really want to provide a justification there. I was just saying they, in some sense, subscribe to their own ideology, and that is what their ideology teaches them. And even in this case, it's they have uh, their ideology, they have the scriptures, and dictating them to, in some sense, uproot and re-educate the bourgeoisie and normalize collectivism. And that is what they did. And
Yeah, even the director in his narration mentioned that where are these guys who say that this is because of Buddha and Buddhism? Where are these
mhm,
guys right now? In reality, this is a particular ideology that is killing us.
true. It's actually the ideology. I mean, one person is the leader. For example, in China, it was Mao Zedong. In um, USSR, it was Lenin. In Vietnam, it was Ho Chi Minh, and in Cuba, it was Fidel Castro. But they subscribe to the ideology, which is what connects them to their other sister socialist states.
Yeah, I think we can like close this live session. But I think
Yeah,
we have
Yeah,
discussed a lot about it.
yeah, yeah.
that's it.
We have covered. Yeah,
That's it, I guess.
yeah,
Unless Mohammed wants to add something.
yeah. Mohammed, I mean, any of you, if you have any closing comments,
Uh,
would love.
no, no, nothing from my end.
Okay, Kaivalya.
Yeah, I have just said it. I mean that
Okay.
Nakal moment was the thing, but yeah, then they see it as land like forcefully taking off their land. So that was
Mm,
something that didn't strike my mind. But yeah,
okay, awesome. And Suprit.
Yeah, that's it. I don't have any more points. That's the
Okay,
share.
awesome. Awesome. I'll just turn off the live stream if that's okay with three of